Hello, and welcome to the College Football Mafia Show. I'm your host, Nathan Bomber Brown, and with me are becoming really good friends out in the cyberspace and social media and content creation. That would be Jen from Renegade Report. How you doing, Jen?
I am doing good. How are you guys tonight?
I'm doing good, Bill. How are you doing?
Doing really good.
All right. So there's been some news, if you want to call it. I'm calling them now leaks at this point that are going out into the world about the college football playoff negotiations. We'll talk about that a little bit, but we've got Bill here specifically to talk about some stuff that was really tied to Florida State and then Oregon State and Washington State as well. We have money flying around, and we need to see if Oregon State and Washington State can get some of that. Really quick, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. It's our normal Wednesday show. The format's going to be changing a little bit. Moen has some other priorities that he's going to be doing. So I'm going to have some guest show hosts with me. I'm hoping Jen wants to do it on a permanent basis, but we'll talk about that later. But we appreciate everybody for being here, and especially your support from the show last night was fantastic. We know there's a lot of competition tonight. I know of two top creators that have shows going right now, so be patient with us. We're going to work through everything, and definitely don't be afraid to leave your comments or suggestions. At the end of the day, make sure you subscribe, follow us all on Twitter, and then turn on your notifications. All right, so I'm going to jump to the first article you sent to me, which is this Pac 2 one. If it actually will bring it up. There it is. All right, so let me present this, and this will be, Bill, one of your two articles. Let's cover the Washington State. Can you see that? Nope, not yet. There we go. All right, there we go. So the Pac-2's contracts with the Mountain West Conference and the West Coast Conference. And just to clarify for everybody, what's going on here for the Pac-2, Bill?
Well, they had to enter into scheduling agreements for football and basketball and all the Olympic sports. So there was a lot of news about in December where they announced first that they were going to be scheduling with the Mountain West Conference, and then later, like 3 weeks later or so, the West Coast Conference, they announced an agreement, scheduling agreement for basketball, potentially all Olympic sports, with baseball at Oregon State potentially going independent. And so after it all sorted out, they've got Mountain West for football, everything else for West with the WCC, except baseball at Oregon State is going to go independent. And the discussion about the Mountain West Conference agreement has been out there, and there was a copy of it that was available online through one of the Nevada sports newspapers. So, and there was reporting on how there was a massive penalty for Oregon State to poach teams from the Mountain West to try to get to that number, the magic 8. To be a legitimate conference within 2 years. So it's about $60 million that Oregon State and Washington State have to pay the Mountain West Conference if they poach 6 schools. And that doesn't include the fees that the schools in the Mountain West have to pay to exit the Mountain West Conference. So it's a pretty significant poison pill, or however you want to term it, with the scheduling agreement. The Mountain West Conference, the WCC, which covers the basketball and the Olympic sports, that also had been reported, as well as some of the cost of it, which wasn't significant. What I hadn't seen, I got the WCC agreement today, and that I don't believe that's been posted yet.
Are those from FOIA requests, Bill?
Yeah, the WCC was a FOIA request I got from Oregon State today. Really timely, too. It only took a week. The Mountain West Conference was a FOIA request that somebody else had done that posted online. And you can, you're not supposed to keep, when you get a FOIA document, you're not supposed to kind of keep it for yourself. You're supposed to release it. It's public, and it's public document at that point.
Okay.
That's why I post them without a paywall so people can see them and also make judgment on their own in terms of the content.
Right.
But what I noticed in the two agreements, what I hadn't heard reported on the Mountain West agreement is there was an option for Oregon State and Washington State to enter into a basketball scheduling agreement. And their charge was going to be $1 million a year to enter into a basketball agreement, whereas the WCC, it was only $175,000 a year. you look at the two conferences now as they're kind of jockeying for positions in the NCAA tournament, and the Mountain West Conference has like 6 teams in the top 50 net ratings right now. So they're
having a good year.
Yeah, they're having a really good year. So we'll call that's a quality basketball conference. The Pac-12 itself right now, I think we've got 3 in the top 50. The WCC has 2 in the top 50 on the men's side. So we saved Oregon State, Washington State saved about $800,000 in scheduling money by going with the cheaper option, the less quality option. So I characterize it as picking savings over quality.
And let's talk about that really quick, because we know BYU was in the West Coast Conference. It was the only place that would take them, right, when they went independent.
Mm-hmm.
How are those two leagues looked at right now? Because I don't see a reason why Washington State and Oregon State don't make that move for basketball purposes like immediately. I mean, you got UNLV, New Mexico, Utah State, there, San Diego State. There's some good programs.
I'm getting. I mean, obviously, with all the stuff that's going on in realignment and the way the SEC and the Pac or the
right
are maneuvering.
Yep.
The Mountain West looks better and better as an option for Oregon State. Just because of the regionality, the cost savings, you add on the NIL payments, the employee wages, you add all these things on, and the Mountain West looks like a reasonable deal. And I think they could compete with. I think they could compete in that conference. They could still compete with the ACC. What's left of the ACC in the Big 12. I think they can, with good coaching, they can step up and compete with those schools. Because there's still the number of 3-star and 4-star players are still the same. That's not changing.
Let me ask Jen a question here really quick, Bill. So Jen, you're on the opposite side of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're a coast to coast show, so we cover as many stories as we can. This one's not necessarily at the very top, but I can tell you what, there's a lot of people are paying attention to it.
Oh yeah.
From Florida State's standpoint, where would you rather see an Oregon State and a Washington State go? For everything except for football, which obviously the West Coast Conference doesn't have. Join Gonzaga and St. Mary's and go to the West Coast Conference, or go to the Mountain West?
I think it would depend. Honestly, I kind of feel like they should do what's going to be best for them as their school, just like I feel like that's what Florida State should do. I think Oregon State and Washington State are very good football programs. Right. So I would want them to go somewhere where they can grow that, because this is, I still don't understand how they were so left out, to be honest. Because I mean, I get it. There were other schools that were more important, especially for the Big 10 and for the Big 12 as well. But I think, look, I sit here and look at Cal and I'm like, if I were the ACC, Washington State has an amazing fan following.
For sure. I
don't understand the Cal and not taking one of those two. That's me. That's how I feel about that. Yeah.
Does everything rotate back to football, Bill? I mean, you've gone through in detail some of this money.
I think so. I think even joining the Mountain West, I think they're going to be able to generate enough money to support, maybe not 16 teams like the current requirement, but I think, if the NCAA or whatever's left, we're left with in a couple of years, if we can trim that requirement of teams back, somewhere into 10 or we got to go much less than 16 for a school like Oregon State, Washington State to play in the Mountain West and field competitive teams in those sports. So I like the Mountain West. I mean, University of Las Vegas, I think it's got a lot of growth potential. San Diego State, great market. Fresno State, Nevada are great football programs. When I left Oregon State, probably like 5-6 years after I left, this would have been in the mid-late 80s. I tried to go to a football game at Fresno State and Nevada.
Right.
And there were no scalpers. There was no tickets to be had anywhere. I mean, they were packed. Those fans were rabid. I could walk up to UCLA, Berkeley, Stanford, anything in the Pac-10 at that time, and I could get a ticket to any football game.
Right.
But those schools are rabid about football, and if we're left with, focusing on the fan bases and having that good good competition between schools. I think the Mountain West is a great one. And Las Vegas, they play their football games in a professional stadium. That's also a plus. So I like the Mountain West. I like the Colorado State. I like the regionality of it. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, because unless there's an ACC, something left where there's a two-coast conference,
right?
But with all the, you add travel costs on top of NIL, employee wages, and everything else, it's going to be such a stretch.
I think sorry, go ahead.
I said we're in a small state. Oregon and Washington are both. Washington's in a bigger state. I mean, Washington, the state of Washington could probably help Washington State get over the hump. But Oregon's a smaller state, lower. Corvallis is a small town. Yep. I'm not going to be able to pitch in for facilities like a lot of the communities are across the country. So
I've been to Corvallis. It's one of the most beautiful towns you'll ever visit. So
I've heard, yeah.
It's absolutely gorgeous.
So my question would be, is if they did, do what are they going to do with their football program though? If what does that look like?
Well, I think for they do have money from the breakup that's going to probably take them 3 years where they can spend at the Power 5 level. They'll have they haven't had much help from the Power 5 schools to get to add to their independent schedule. They've got the Mountain West is probably 2/3 and the Power 5 is 1/3. So they'll probably limp along for a couple of years here and then see what happens with this next reformation. So they've got enough to take them through the trials and tribulations. I think all the schools are going to be going through across the country in the next 3 years. So.
And I have a question on that because, there was big news today about more leaks, and we'll talk about the leaks and how they're targeted right now. You have dueling proposals out from Dennis Dodd versus The Athletic. I mean, it's just crazy, some of the reporting on the college football playoff stuff. But the 2026 horizon is it's like right next door to us, right? It's coming up so quickly. Does that give enough time for Washington State and Oregon State to cobble something together that will be strong enough for them to compete? Or is this a reverse merger and you're hoping the ACC picks you up and that's just kind of the only outlet?
Yeah, I think they would look at the ACC first because they have all the Power 5 schools, and I think there's some standing with that, unless the Big Ten and SEC blow it up, blow everything up. Right. But there is some standing with being a Power 5 school. They've talked about not letting in any more G5 schools to take part of the piece of the pie. They talked about not scheduling G5 schools, some of the Power 5 conferences. So I think if they were to get an invitation to the ACC for just football and were able to keep maybe the rest of the sports in the Mountain West Conference, that would be ideal. But without that invitation, I think the Mountain West looks to me to be a decent option, and I think they could operate. They might get state help to stay at that level. A lot of the G5 schools get institutional funding for their sports programs. So having been left out, there may be some horse trading between University of Oregon's allocation and Oregon State's allocation to keep them a well-funded G5 program that can compete with kind of this, we'll call it a second tier. So you got the Power 2 and then you got the second tier. Because we've competed with Oregon over the last few years with a $50 million gap in our funding. Yes. So if you got a good coach, there's plenty of players out there. The pool of players is not changing unless you add, another couple of years of eligibility and start stockpiling like they did in the old days.
Jen, what do you think about that? Where do you think their best hope is? The ACC or reforming the Pac-12?
Well, I don't know that it's going to be reforming the Pac-12. Maybe it will. I don't see it just because of their options, right? I don't think the options that would be out there to form a new Pac-12. I mean, I guess unless they start taking some from the American, but then you're talking about travel costs and all these things. Yeah, that's true. It's wild. Now, here's the one thing I'm wondering. Okay, so if Florida State leaves, when Florida State leaves, because we know that relationship is so soured. That's a bad divorce. This is War of the Roses now. It's getting ugly. But would some of the teams that may not be looked at by, say, the Big 12, the Big 10, the SEC, right? Could they then get on the phone with Oregon State, Washington State, and maybe do something there? Would that be possible?
Bill, what do you think?
And what would give me an example? Would that be the like a
I mean, I'm thinking like with the ACC, I'm thinking like the Boston colleges, the like the NC States, those teams, would they maybe reach out and say, can we merge?
Yeah, I think given all the financial layers that are going to be added on to schools in the next few years, I like the idea of keeping in California, because they've got a great economy, and Fresno State's a large university. They're part of a large system that has already funded San Diego State's football stadium. So there's a financial heft there that might be able to help some of these teams to continue to compete. But I would be worried about joining up with a school a similar size and a similar economy that Oregon State has, just because I just see local and state governments getting involved in the next wave, just like minor league baseball and professional sports. The coaches aren't going to want to cut their salaries. The athletic directors aren't going to cut their salaries. There's not going to be any right sizing of budgets. People are just going to be looking for more money to fill up the coffers, to keep everybody's situation the same. So
that the same is relative.
Yeah.
Because now you're exactly right. You're talking about tiers. And we'll get into that a little bit more. Let me get some shout outs.
Can I have one more question?
Yeah, go ahead,
one more
Jen,
question.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I just have one more. Okay, so if we're not talking about like maybe those teams kind of break off and merge, would you think that the ACC would just reach out and invite them?
I could see there being a West Coast wing. I mean, I think Oregon State, Washington, Cal, Stanford, San Diego State, Fresno State, Las Vegas. I mean, there's a group of schools there. If I were the ACC, that I'd want. Nevada's Las Vegas particularly. They have the wherewithal to help the sports team. Their hotel taxes, their tourism revenue, that's all perfect for supporting athletics. I mean, they've been on a tear recently, adding hockey and baseball and football. So that's a school I would look at too, as part of the West Coast wing if I were the ACC.
That'll form over time. We'll have to see if the ACC, what happens when Florida leaves, right?
Yeah.
And before we get to that, because that's the next story we're going to cover, I want to give out some shout outs really quick. Buckshot Kid, David Hackett, both members. Nathan Campbell, a member. Let's see here. There's so many people. I'm sorry if I don't get your name. Larry, the GM, is here. Larry, I tagged one of your comments. We'll cover that in a little bit. Timothy Green, Carrie, Glenn Lumen, Sergeant Pickles. These are all members, guys. Thank you so much. Tip of the hat. I love you. Moen's not here for sound effects, so you're just going to have to take me talking. Daniel Gygax, Summit Hawk, The Big Lubbock, 27 Sports, Edward Wayner. Wow, there are a bunch. Scott Schrader, duplicates. Ben Griffin, another member. I think Jen Santee is in here. I wonder who that is.
Oh, who is that?
Morris Simmons is in here. Renegade Report, George, in the audience. Good to have you here, George.
Hey, George.
Appreciate it. Conundrum is here. Immaculate, one of my running mates. He might join us a little bit later. All right, I think I'll call it there. Man, we have so many comments. It's already, we've only been going 10 minutes. Sorry.
I gotta give George a huge shout out because he's supposed to be at his birthday dinner, but he just couldn't stay away.
Oh, thank you so much for being here, George. I really appreciate it. Believe me. All right, let's talk private equity. And sorry, that banner was supposed to be rotating. Let me get that taken care of first. Let me get that banner up now. There we go. Oh, it should work. Okay. Now I'm going to go to your second story that you put out. Right here.
That's my cleanup from my discussion with Jen and George last night.
Oh, is it? Okay, well, let's get it
Well,
right.
every time I give a presentation, I talk about this stuff. I'm stuck in spreadsheet world,
Right.
academic world, and every time I talk about it, I start thinking, I really that didn't quite land, or I missed something that would make it easier to explain. That's why I like these shows, is I get to kind of get feedback on how these presentations come across. So last night when I was talking with Jen and George, I was going through this key spreadsheet. There's a redacted series of redacted spreadsheets in the FOIA documents, like 17 of them, and they're all heavily redacted. And there's one summary page where they kind of pull together kind of the key details so you can just kind of see it in one place. And it doesn't follow the typical revenue on top, expenses, at the bottom, and net profit at the end. In this case, they had a top that had a couple of just data, informational line items. And as I was walking through them the other night, I was thinking that they were revenue, but they weren't. They were informational items. So I'll explain that. In the spreadsheet, if you can scroll down, I think I have.
I'm happy to.
I have and you might be able to click on this.
Yeah, we'll see if I can make that bigger.
You might be able to click.
There we go. That's the biggest I can make it, Bill.
And I added arrows, and I thought the other night I was thinking, gosh, if I would have just added arrows to those numbers, right, as I walk through them, I think people could have followed a little easier. So I'll start with this information group of pieces at the top. There's the blue arrow points to capital. $2 million in 2024 and $1 million in 2025.
Okay.
That is the private equity that's coming into this partnership for the merchandising and concessions and marketing.
So just to clear this up for a dummy, for people watching, what we're looking at here is money that's coming from private equity. It's being invested and essentially spent by Florida State.
So they're creating a partnership.
Okay.
This is buying the private equity company 3% stake in the company.
Okay.
So if it's $3 million, just kind of do this. The simple math is that Florida State is saying today, as it sits right now, the merchandising and the marketing, the concession piece that they have is worth $100 million. So that's kind of the starting point. Then the green line shows that the private equity firm is going to be getting paid about $500,000 a year for managing in the first 3 years to managing, I guess, the startup of this, growing the business.
Okay.
And the second group, gross revenue, that's they've just pulled out and said, here's the new revenue that's going to be created by this private equity firm, because you're getting expertise. The $3 million is not significant. You really want their expertise to grow the business.
Right.
So they're showing in 2025, adding $3 million. Doak new revenue is the football stadium new revenue. Tucker is the basketball arena. NR is for new revenue. Concert sponsorships is for events that are held at those facilities. And I guess the Doak DTC is the Doak, I believe the Doak Center, and sponsorships there. So that's gross revenue. Going to the yellow arrow, kind of 2/3 or almost 3/4 down the sheet.
Right here.
I've been pointing out that they're looking at total net revenue from this new venture. New revenue will be $18 million in 2028. So that's what the private equity firm has that's how they've grown the pie. And then the bottom arrows, the bottom group, the gray area shows that the initial split of that net new revenue between Florida State and their partner is the first split is based on their ownership in this new venture. So Florida State gets 90% of the baseline revenue. The partner gets 3%. And so over in 2028, the first red arrow, that's showing that the split of the baseline revenue is $7.5 million to Florida State, $233,000 to the partner. Now, what happens after that? So after that baseline amount of revenue is met, and that's about 8% return on the $100 million investment value. The next level gets split more towards the favor of the equity partner.
Right.
So they get 10%, which is 3 times their interest in the company. They get 10% of the revenue. Florida State gets 90%. So at the very end there, they're getting $9 million, and this is they didn't provide the percentages return on investment. So I did a little spreadsheet to show people what the return on investment is. So in this little spreadsheet here, I'm showing in year 1, which is the baseline revenue, it's the gray area shows it being split based on their ownership. So they're each getting 7.78% return on their money on baseline. Right. In year 5, the $8 million, the yellow line, that's the new revenue. So the first tier split the same way as year 1. It's the baseline revenue gets split 7.5 and 200,000. But then the tier 2 split gets split towards the private equity, the PE, the private equity firm. When you add the tier 1 split and the tier 2 split together, the very last number, FSU is getting $16.7 million return on their $97 million ownership. The private equity firm is getting $1.2 million return on their $3 million stake in the company. So that's a 17.3% return for Florida State and a 42% return for the private equity. Now I sent that to George, before we talked. He said, 42%, that's great, but Florida State has the big pot, as they have 97% of the stake, right, and they're getting 17% if the projections. That's a great return on investment for being somewhat passive manager of that, building the brand and the equity. So right. This is all this is a spreadsheet. It's all on paper. How it works out, you don't know, but the projections show that the Florida State is hoping to create about a 17% return on their $100 million marketing, merchandising, concession operation. And I don't know what's completely within that envelope because there's so many redactions. Right. But I'm just guessing based on the redactions and how they're sequenced in the documents that it includes that concessions, merchandising, and marketing, and bringing in concerts, new experiences for ticket holders in the basketball and the football area, which is so gobbledygook for increasing prices.
Bill, you make this all so easy, and I'm like, wow, why don't I start a private equity firm? Why doesn't every school do this?
Well, we'll see how it works out. I mean, there's I included a link in my story today of.
And I can post let me post a link to the story.
It was to kind of show what the private equity, how they work with retailers. There's been a lot of horror stories where private equity comes in and takes over entire companies.
Right.
Here, it's a very strategic, very small investment. Florida State's bracketed any loss potential. There's really very little downside at all for Florida State in this. They're really buying expertise and
the management piece.
And they're getting a management piece that's got a stake in the game. So they're incentivized to work really hard to try to boost that revenue. So it's a good structure. Now, I think there are. I know I had done a case study at UC Davis of a medical campus expansion, and they had also entered into these kind of relationships with private equity firms to lease spaces and lease back space to the university and create kind of add expertise to create revenue for the university. So those are called innovation districts, and there's quite a few of them popping up everywhere that there's a heavy science or medical presence on a campus. And Florida State has a partnership as well under this umbrella, Project Ocielo, that involves a Catalyst Healthcare Real Estate and their football operations center. So they're doing something strategic there as well. I came back to this piece because as I was talking to Jen and George, I realized it's like, crap, that's the $3 million. That's $100 million. If I would have, it would have made it a lot easier to explain it if I had put those values.
So again, a dummy. And then Jen, I'm going to turn you loose. I know you have Florida State questions, but just from a third party, I have no dog in the hunt, right? Mm-hmm. What is the end all be all of this particular story? Is it that Florida State now they've done this project Osceola, they've got the keys, they just need to make a decision on how to spend it and how to turn it on? Or is it a different story that says we only want to do half as much, and so we're only going to go in a half measure and try to come up with the money a different way? Is this an all or nothing thing, or can it? Because you've mentioned 100 million here. I know we've talked about up to 500 million was the project Osceola proposed.
Yeah, so here they're generating by letting somebody come in with a 3% stake, they have the potential to have an upside of $17 million a year. I think they're going to do that, and hopefully it pans out. Hopefully, if it only creates 10% or 12%, it's probably still a good deal for Florida State. So that deal, I think, that had been cooking for probably 8 months. That spreadsheet was done in August, and they had started back, probably 8 months prior to that or 10 months prior to that. So I think that one's pretty kind of getting firmed up, and they entered into a partnership with Catalyst Real Estate at the end of last month for that football operations center. So that piece is done. And I think where they do the bond financing, that's kind of a separate issue. They've got on deck they have $500 million of projects they want to finance.
Right.
And when they go out to bid for that, there may be some interest rate savings where they could take a little bit off the top, borrow a little extra money where they can pull $50 million, $100 million extra. And then in their cash flows, they're just their cash flows, not doing anything fancy with private equity partners. They've got $90 million slotted in their cash flow in the next couple of years, which looks to be, there's no explanation for it, looks to be an exit fee payment.
It looks to me like it's a HELOC. If you're a homeowner, it's almost like you go to get a HELOC loan to pay off your short-term credit card debt.
They're doing one refinancing. So the about 400 million of the 500 million is for new facilities, or new renovations, and then there's 100 million where they're doing a refinancing of an existing debt, which is going to save them money.
Okay, now see, that makes sense to me. Okay,
yeah,
all right, yeah, I found the nugget. Right, that was what I was looking for. That's what it sounded like. All right, Jen, I know you had some questions. Go ahead.
I do. So is all of this, and do you think that Florida State would actually, are they going to use this private equity for, like you said, you think that 90 million is an exit fee, right? That's kind of what you're looking at, right?
Well, that's in the cash flow. So that's just their football program and their revenue that they can place that in there. And I didn't see, and it might be in the redactions, but I didn't see an offset of that from private equity or any other sources. So it looks to me like, just from a cash flow standpoint, they've got that piece of it is almost separate from the private equity piece. It's separate from the bond piece. So I said before, it seemed like you had three pieces. You had the litigation to drop the number, you had private equity to kind of juice the revenues, and you had the bond financing to maybe get a deal on the interest rates where you could borrow a little extra more. So you had these three pieces. I think that the fourth piece is really in your existing cash flow. You seem to have the capacity to make a payment towards that exit fee without the other three pieces.
Yeah. I agree with you on that. I think they do have that in, so they don't have to do an exit fee using those funds. I do think that's the plan right now. And I think that's why you're seeing them use the private equity for the other items, right? I think that's what their plan is. But I know that there's a whole renovation of Doak Campbell, and we're all seeing it being demolished right now and being rebuilt. Is this part of their plan to say, hey, we're very attractive to other conferences? Or, because I think that's what they were doing. I feel like they could have done this years ago, and they didn't start it till this year, obviously. I mean, I guess they've started it. They've worked on it. But what is maybe go into what the appeal in doing all these things is? Like, because some people don't get it. They're like, why are you spending all this money if you're whining about not being paid enough, right? So I think what do you think the appeal would be for them to do this? What's the purpose?
Well, right? I think athletic directors, university presidents, they like building stuff. Building stuff is part of their resume. It's part of their career trajectory. if you're applying for a job at the next step up and they say, well, what did you do in the athletic area? You say, well, we didn't do anything. We've got a 50-year-old stadium that everybody hates. So I think there's a lot of drive, just rational actors within these universities that are spending money for their own initiative. I do think there's no downside side to it, because I could see if you get in the Big Ten or SEC, which seems likely,
right,
eventually they're going to have standards for stadiums. They're going to start asking people to, just like they do in professional football and baseball,
right.
They're going to say, hey, you've got to have upgraded improvements. You've got to meet these standards. And so I don't
45,000 seat stadiums.
Yeah, they're going to,
big leagues.
Yeah.
What about rental stadiums? I'm kidding.
Oh, wow. You just couldn't avoid.
I can't help it. It's a problem. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead.
it is. It's kind of a compulsion, I think, actually. All right. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's a
Go
tick.
ahead, though.
It's a tick.
Yeah. No, I think any investment in facilities right now at the Big Ten and the SEC level is wise. And I think the next generation, 5-10 years from now, it's going to be leaning on local governments and states to help with that. They did that in Memphis. The state helped with their stadium renovation. The state system helped with San Diego State's new stadium. I think public financing, just like it's come to all major league sports and facilities, is coming to college sports for those elite teams to keep the resources free to pay employee salaries or player salaries and marketing deals.
That's exactly
I guess
right.
one thing I would add on that would be, like you mentioned Memphis, and I'm sorry, Nathan, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm just
You're
saying,
fine. Go ahead.
Okay, you mentioned Memphis.
Loaded with stuff, so go ahead.
Yeah, I am, because because yes, the community is helping to build, like to do renovations for the Liberty Bowl and do all these things. But also, with Memphis, the Grizzlies, the public built the FedEx Forum and paid for that. And it's weird for me that in NFL, NBA, they use public funds all the time to build these things, right? They take care of that all the time. I don't understand why it's so taboo sometimes to even say it, for a college football stadium or basketball arena or whatever, because honestly, I'm not trying to be, but that's where the money is. That's people are rabid, like fans are rabid. I don't understand why it's not used more, I guess, for colleges. I think that's.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. It is coming though, because you're going to start looking to the commissioner. So a commissioner like Sankey, he's going to put out the edict. Hey, get your local government and state governments in line to start with these improvements, because we don't want to share this money. We don't want to put this money into facilities. We're driving hotel tax. We're driving tourism. We're filling up these communities are being filled up every weekend with these Super Bowl like populations of people coming to town. And they just like some schools might look at Oregon State, Washington State as kind of the dead weight on the media revenue side. Someone like Sankey is going to look at these communities and states and say they're free riders.
Right.
They're dead weight. They need to start pitching in, and that's coming. And then in Oregon, there are 2 single A baseball teams that are holding Eugene and Hillsboro, Oregon, hostage for their single A baseball team. Like, who would ever care, right? For $120 million stadium renovations.
It's ridiculous.
And so they've gone to the state, asking for $10-15 million. They've gone to local governments asking for $15 or $20 million. So if it's happening at the single A baseball level, it's here for college football.
Very fair.
Yeah.
You good for a second, Jen?
Yeah.
Okay,
that was
good.
That
All
was
right.
good. I just had that question because I keep hearing people complain about it and say, "Oh, this is ridiculous. We shouldn't involve it." And I keep wondering why. Because university sports, basketball, football is very profitable even for the city, right? I mean, college towns depend on it. So
Right.
I don't understand the taboo with using those funds if you need upgrades. I
don't know. I think we're going to get more and more, and Bill said this, more creative with financing as we go, because the money and just from the general public is drying up. People, especially taxes hate being on the hook for stadiums.
Oh, yeah.
And all these other things. So I think they had to be creative. But let me get to some comments here. First of all, Conundrum says hit the like button. I appreciate that, Conundrum. And then Timothy Green, not to be outdone, he was the first one to say it. I appreciate everybody's support. We're almost 45 minutes in. Please hit subscribe on YouTube. Follow us all on Twitter. And then, leave your comments and consider becoming a member of the big college football mafia family. Let me run that membership video, and then we'll get right back to questions.
Want to become a member of the college football mafia family? Simply select the Join button from our homepage. There are several options with their own unique benefits to choose from. You can also set yourself to auto-accept gifted membership by selecting the gift settings options as shown.
All right, let's get to some questions. I want to welcome Immaculate to the stage. He's come in, and he's going to see me through for maybe the second half of this show with Jen. Anyway, let's get to some comments. I have specific questions that have come up that I'm hoping you can answer, Bill. Let's see. Here's one first from Brett Taylor. He says, Bill, do you see some P2 schools leaving the conference for football and follow Notre Dame and go independent, except for?
So the P2s would be okay. So that
SEC in the Big Ten, yeah.
I've been working on this survival index the last week. Kind of looking at all the universities that they got their own unique characteristics of, like Northwestern's in a great town, Chicago. Illinois has got a great balance sheet to be able to support certainly the facility side. Indiana, again, a little. They're in, let's see, where are they? Bloomington? Not sure. I can't remember where they are, but Vandy's in Memphis, aren't they? Or are they in Nashville?
They're in Nashville.
They're in Nashville. That's a big town. So some of like those schools, I think there could be some. I think some of the Southeast schools, like that are in the poorer states, like Arkansas, Mississippi, maybe Alabama schools. If they spiral into a losing season, they're probably not gonna have the resources to fall back on with the public sector to maybe help with facilities. But some of those schools that are mentioned here, I think they might be in states and local governments with large enough economies to keep them going. And again, I'm thinking that we're going to be going towards an NFL model of the relationship between local government, states, and these professional college sports teams.
I don't think there's any chance those schools leave their gravy train.
Oh God, no.
Some of them are going to take the money and invest it in Olympic sports and try to win national championships.
Right, they're going to do other investments
in volleyball and baseball and the other hockey and those things. But I could see I see UCLA. I don't know if they're going to tap out eventually because they don't need the admissions. They don't have an appetite for investing in football. The fan base is really weak. I mean, if they go, if they start on a 2-11, 3-8, 3-9 or whatever streak for a long time, and with all those travel expenses hitting the Olympic sports, I could see a school like that perhaps dropping out.
Okay.
This is like 6, 8, 10 years out. I mean, I don't think any of them tap out, in the first 5, 6 years. But if they start putting requirements on each of the schools to upgrade their facilities, saying
that was gonna, that's what I was gonna ask.
Say, I want you guys to, tear down that University of Oregon. You can't play Eugene anymore. You got to play in Portland. So build a stadium in Portland.
Those schools know that the chance they survive on their own without the protection of a big conference with lots of money. Yeah, believe me, BYU did it, and it had the support of millions and millions of people, and it was very, very difficult.
Yeah,
nobody's going to do that by choice. The only way that's going to happen is if they get relegated, and nobody on my show recently that I know has said relegation is coming. Now, some might think that consolidation will continue to happen, and that means thinning out those schools. But if that happens, I think we're a long way away from it. So
it's almost like I was thinking relegation is a term we use, but there's also, you could almost consider relocation of franchises from one university to another university. So in case of Oregon State and Washington State, they lost their franchise in a Power Five conference, and that franchise went to Cincinnati, Houston, bigger markets, more capacity to actually fund and stay at that level.
Absolutely right. Another question from Daniel, and this can go to anybody who wants to answer it. Would a municipal bond sell, so selling a municipal bond, raise the same amount without selling an equity in the university? That's a good question, Daniel.
So at Florida State, they're only doing 3% of $100 million component of probably $1 billion,
valuation for the
valuation. So they're just selling 3% of a small percent of the football program. So it's probably less than 1% if you value the whole football program that they're selling, and they're really that equity, that $3 million equity piece, is really just to put skin in the game for the equity partner to try to raise the revenue and get a heavy return on their investment. The municipal bond, clearly you would get because they can borrow at 4%. So, and that private equity firm in the marketing side could be making 40% on their small investment. So, they definitely would sell the bonds first before they tried to bring in private equity at a larger scale than that.
Jen or Immaculate, either of you have a question on that?
In terms of the bonds, oh man, that's so far over my head. I was just thinking,
yeah, it's definitely over mine. I just thought I'd ask.
The previous part, I think I'd have a hard time believing that like a college program could be relocated. A large city.
I mean, when I say relocated, I'm thinking it's like like Oakland. The franchise, the person owns the franchise. They're a member of Major League Baseball. It's a limited organization. It's a club, and the club says you can move or not. So it's not quite the same, but you're basically trying to move. The realignment is trying to move to bigger markets and try to get rid of the small market teams. And I was in Sacramento probably a 6 or 7 year period of just dealing with sports, and as a small market for professional sports, you got a lot of headwinds. You don't have a lot of heavy hitter investors. So I think for the small market teams in this new era that are out there, and that might be in Arkansas, that might be a Mississippi State, they're in small towns, small states. Are they going to have the capacity, and will the conference just say, you know what, we'd rather have that slot go to another school in a bigger market?
I get the thinking on that, but these colleges kind of operate differently than a professional team, where a professional team takes on the name of the city, it becomes part of the culture of the city. Like some of these schools, they take on the name and the culture of the state. Like born and raised in Iowa, with how much of the state's following it, and they have one of the largest followings. I don't think you need a large market. Just, some of the case with like Oregon State is that they have Oregon in the same state. I don't know if there's an actual solution for that. It's just,
I think it's just going to be one of the problems.
It's just, I don't think the professional model helps solve the college problem, because it's all based around the university more so than just getting a fan base.
Yeah, I tend to say that just because I think that the same investment requirements and the same pressure on local governments, state governments to help these sports franchises or these colleges is going to emerge in the next 5 years, because conference commissioners are not going to want to let their media revenue go towards facilities.
Right.
They're going to be compensated based on net revenue to all the universities. And if some of that's getting swept away into something a college or university could do, I think the commissioners will start to set standards.
All right. Let's get a couple more questions on this financing thing, then we'll move to realignment next. First, question for you, Jen. Nathan Campbell says, Jen, do you think Florida State gets out of the ACC? How fast do you see the ACC fall apart if they do leave? I'm going to add that.
Okay, so yes, I think that relationship, we're talking, like I said earlier, War of the Roses. This is a toxic, bad relationship where people fight constantly, and it's been going on for 30 years. Florida State has not been happy in the ACC for a long time. The ACC hasn't been happy with Florida State for a long time because they continue to complain about them. So I do think they're going to get out of the ACC. The question is when, not if, and the question is how much, not if. So I think that's where we're going here. Now, how quickly does the ACC fall apart? I think a lot of that depends on a certain four-letter network, right?
You're talking about Fox N, maybe, or CNN Business?
Yes, MSNBC, of course. MSNBC.
There you go.
Yes. I think that depends on a four-letter network because, as we know, a certain network can opt out of their TV deal rights in not in 2036, like the ACC loves to claim. That isn't the truth. We've seen it. We've got the proof of that. So, the other thing for the ACC is that if you look at the ACC network, you look at the ratings. Their ratings are Florida State and Clemson. Florida State number 1, Clemson number 2. Okay. I know it's stunning. People do not watch lacrosse on Sunday mornings. I get it. I am as surprised as everybody else. I don't know what else to say, but what I will say is that when ESPN as a business, when Florida State leaves, I would say, are going to pull that plug. They are not going to renew that till 2036. I'm sorry. I don't see how it works financially. And once that gets done, I think that's when you see it fall apart. Maybe. We'll see. We'll see.
Immaculate. What do you think?
Well, yeah, they're going to pull the statement that they're not going to pick up the contract, but I don't think that leads to it falling apart. I think if that leads to is a renegotiation, and so they'll get a different deal, a new deal. They'll want to know what's going to be left, though. They don't want to renegotiate and then more departures and then renegotiate. It's going to be they're going to want to see what's the final tally, what's the final damage, what's the value now, what can we do now. So yeah, I do think that they're just waiting to pull that, but they kind of want to know what the future is. And so with a renegotiated deal, and maybe you guys might be able to talk about this even better, but I would think that means a brand new Gore. And so that in itself could cause some quick movement.
Yeah, they might lose a significant number of teams once Florida State leaves. That's the breakup.
That's right. Kind of where I was going with that. And I think if let's just say out the bat, Florida State, Clemson go, right? Clemson goes with Florida State, right? Let's say ESPN's pulling that plug.
They might they could renegotiate, but you're speaking from a power perspective, from an autonomous school level perspective. There's going to be strains on that relationship. If you lose those two brands, but Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it happens fast.
Right after
Florida
State leaves, you think ACC?
Yeah, I think it'll happen fast. I think some of those schools have the financial resources to do it, and if they get the invitation, they go.
Right.
So if Fox wants to pay for a couple people to add them onto the Big Ten, or ESPN wants to add on to the SEC, they're gone. It happens really quick.
Okay, that's fair. Jen, did you want to add anything? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You were saying something.
Oh, no, you're fine. No. I was just going to say, yeah, I agree with that. I do think the ACC does fall apart, although I would love for it to stay together and for all these losers who are still whining about us wanting to leave to have to just be stuck in there with that clown show. I would love it, but I do think it falls apart because I think the Big 12 is going to take some of the other teams out of the ACC, and I think that's when it dissolves. Yeah, and I think you're going to look at like Duke, some other schools going to like with Harvard and some other things. I think that's where you're going to go. That's what I think.
I bring you on the show to be opinionated, Jen. I don't know what you're doing. Why are you holding back? I bring you on here to really tell people what you're thinking, and you're being so passive.
I know. I'm so bashful. I'm so sorry, guys.
That's all right.
I don't mean to be.
All right. We got a Twitch viewer. We haven't really done a ton with Twitch. We're still growing that. But Dark Sage 9117 says, hot take, if Florida State leaves Clemson will go with them to where? asking an open-ended question. I say the Big Ten, and then Notre Dame will back out of the conference in all sports, but football, and settle with the Big Ten. Bill, do you think Clemson gets a free ride with Florida State to the Big Ten?
I don't. They're a valuable property. The SEC's already got one in South Carolina, right?
Yes.
Boy, I think they're in a hard place. I don't know. I don't really know if their numbers are gonna. I don't know what the Big Ten is thinking about in terms of their value added to their market.
Right.
Well, I think they could be in. They could be left. Yeah, and I'm not sure about Clemson.
Jen, what do you think?
So I've said this for a while. I think Clemson's issue is not their fan support. It's not their stadium. It's really not even their program. It's the fact that their academics for the Big Ten are a couple years away from the Big Ten being able to say, let's just make this right. Like let's make an exception, or let's do this. Clemson just has a little bit, and their enrollment is very small. Like it's not a huge university, right?
Yeah, how many is it? I don't even know how many go to Clemson.
God, somebody said it.
Their academic budget's under $1 billion, so it's on the small side in terms of just their.
All right, Immaculate, look that up for me. How many students go
to
Clemson?
And their state's not a big
21,000
economy.
21,000. Okay.
It's a very small enrollment for the Big Ten. And then again, with the SEC, that's the other question. I don't know that Clemson brings enough footprint because the SEC has South Carolina, right?
There, yeah.
What does Clemson bring for the SEC? Other than Clemson not going to the Big Ten. That's the only thing I can see right now. And again, Clemson is a great program. They've really built it up. They've got great facilities. They've got all of it. They've got everything, fan support, engagement, all these things. The problem is their viewers nationally aren't there, right? They're not huge. They're not eye-popping numbers. They're not numbers that other conferences want to just, hoard over. Clemson's hope right now is that North Carolina absolutely 100% turns down the Big Ten. That's one.
And Notre Dame joins the conference.
Exactly.
ACC.
Yep. Notre Dame joins, and I would think that if the SEC decides, or maybe says, well, the Big Ten is going to try and take them, so we're going to take them playing defense. I think that's their hope right now. Because honestly, with Clemson's program, the way it's been and how successful they've been in the last 10 years, you would think if they had a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, we'd know it.
Yep.
We'd know it.
I bet the SEC would like to trade them for South Carolina.
I mean, I agree with that 100%.
But they've been with them forever, so that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Who knows?
Immaculate, I know you're chewing on your
tongue. I'm good. I've talked about this one so many times over. I'm good with hearing what others have to say on it. I like Clemson. I think if you look at Clemson, they're comparable to an Oregon. They're comparable to a Nebraska, as someone saying in chat. My only issue a little bit with them is a Clemson and Florida State combo. It's kind of the same space, although Florida State has some higher grades. So I don't know if the Big Ten would be good with taking both of them together. Now, we could see a situation where, sorry, Jen, maybe Florida State does get grabbed up by the SEC. They just roll out the red carpet. They do everything. Maybe the Big Ten grabs in North Carolina and Clemson.
That's a very good point. I should have said that too, because I think that if Florida State is able to be wooed by the SEC, I honestly think that what the SEC is never going to offer what it would take for Florida State to do that. I just don't see it. But I do think that's a good point. If the SEC grabs Florida State, I do think the Big Ten's, that is a great move for Clemson. That is going to be good news for Clemson.
Yeah, that becomes the football ad.
Yep.
Yeah.
If I'm a commissioner, I'd be somewhat concerned about their sustainability. They kind of come 100%. Up with the record, a good coach. He hasn't been interested in playing the game with all the revenue pieces.
You're talking about Clemson?
Yeah, small state economy. Their fan revenue is significant,
Yep.
a big chunk of that university's overall revenue.
Well,
But that also
Illini
means-
Ted says Clemson is better version of Boise State. So
Oof, that's a lot better version, but
Yeah.
technically he's not wrong.
Yeah. So, can they sustain, as more money is required to keep things going as a
Right.
Clemson, South Carolina, their local government, are they going to be able to keep them in the game when they're, middling Big Ten team? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think you look at it like Clemson's other sports have not been what's the word I'm looking for? The academics aren't great, and they're fine. Their academics are fine. I'm just saying they're not,
Big Ten is very academic heavy. They're
yes,
very
and
much
so
into the money that goes into the endowments,
Yeah,
AAU, all those things.
And I have heard the same thing about the sustainability of Clemson. If Dabo leaves, where does that program go? Because it was nothing before him, really. I mean, let's be real, except for 1980, right?
Well, they have 3 national championships, Jen. You can't just cast them
With
aside.
Dabo, they had one in 1980, right?
Okay.
And Dabo had 2, right? And they were very down before Dabo, and Dabo almost got fired. Dabo had to make way new hires.
Right.
They wouldn't have those 2 if he didn't change some things. When they lost some assistant coaches, now you've seen some changes. So I do think that sustainability thing is a concern. I think that is a concern for someone. That's where I was going. I'm not saying they're not relevant. That's not what I was saying. I was just saying that, before 1980 or like after 1980, Clemson was very middling, even in the ACC. Which is obviously how I feel about that, a crap conference. So,
okay.
I just, it is the sustainability question. And I do like that point. That's where I was going.
Could I say something for Clemson?
Sure.
I think if they are the Big Ten team down there in the Southeast, I think the sustainability issue is not as much of a problem. You could have Dabo leave. Someone else is going to come in there, get paid big, have all that recruiting around there when most of the schools are going against.
Well, if you're in the Big Ten, you have all the advantages.
That's what I'm saying. I think Clemson's sustainability problem is actually at least partially solved by joining the Big Ten. The problems, I just don't see them coming as the sidekick of Florida State.
Let me really quick pass this on. We're an hour in. I want to thank everybody for the ones that were here at the very beginning. We're up to 100 people watching us. I want to thank everybody for being here on a Wednesday night. We're doing some format changes, so I appreciate everybody supporting Jen and I as we do this first show tonight. It's one of, I hope, many, but we encourage everybody to subscribe. Make sure you follow us all on Twitter. And this last thing, I want to just do a shout out and ask for Wild Ute, one of my team. And these 4 videos right here, this U to the Big Ten, UNC to the Big Ten, Clemson to the Big Ten. Sorry, there's 5 of them. Florida State with financing, right? What's it called? I'm sorry.
Private equity.
Private equity financing. And then Florida State to the Big Ten, which is the first video you put together. These are all videos that Wild Ute has put out there for people to do your own searching. You don't have to take what we're telling you as fact. You just put it together for you. He's put it in videos. They're open to anybody except for this one right here. And that's this. We always have one member only video. It's about 2 weeks. It sits there. And currently that one is the Miami one. A lot of people are interested. But I'm going to post the link so everybody can go to these. And I encourage everybody to watch them. They are absolutely fantastic. If you have a question about why Clemson might fit, if you have a question and you just don't think UNC has value, Ute's giving you the data. You can make up your own mind. All right. Let's move to realignment. Unless you guys have anything else you want to say about Clemson.
I do. I have a question. So where do you think Clemson's record is going to be in the Big Ten year after year?
Oh, I think they're a 7-5, 8-4 team at best.
Yeah.
8-4
because of the
9-3.
travel.
Really? In the Big Ten?
Because of the travel. Yeah, I think the travel is a big deal from the Southeast.
I mean, they'll have their occasional, big ones, and they'll make it into whatever postseason there is. But I would say generally, 8-4 is probably their spot.
Ceiling.
Maybe 9-3. Yeah.
And a good year.
As a
And it
Southeast
depends-
school, they're going to have a good time. But the travel could get them depending upon how the schedulers deal with them there in Chicago.
Well, let's give you an analog. Florida State's going to have to travel a Pacific Northwest sometimes. And those trips,
Mm-hmm.
You're talking like 6 hours in the air. So by the time you land, you get to your hotel, travel is a real thing. And these schools are going to have to tool up. Everybody in the Big 12s, Big 10's going to have to do it.
Time zones.
Yep.
Time zones.
Yeah, I think one thing Florida State did do well, and I'm again, obviously I look through everything through Garnet glasses. So again, I am very biased. I understand that. So y'all just stick with me here. But I think with Florida State though, they did such a good job for so long scheduling so many random teams, dealing with that. I mean, Florida State would go to Nebraska, Michigan, Notre Dame, BYU. We just talked about it. Like they've done this for years. I don't think the travel would really bother them that much. I think that's something that they're extremely used to. Now I know kids change and the players change, but I think it's something that they gotten used to and prepare them for, because I think that they schedule a little different than say at Clemson. I know Clemson does schedule out of conference games too, but it's usually Georgia and Auburn, all those things, right?
Bobby Bowden always traveled. When they were independent, BYU and Florida State played a few times because of that. So Florida State has had a history of going out of the area. Clemson has not.
No, and that's why I think
Clemson at Cal.
Yeah.
Or Washington or Oregon or even Wisconsin. Clemson is not used to this.
No. And I think, I think that was just my point whenever I hear anybody say about the travel with Florida State. I get it. It's going to be hard. That is a hard thing to deal with. But I don't think it's going to affect them as much as people think it is, because that is something that program actually prepares for, right? Because they're used to it. So.
Very fair. All right, let's get to some comments before we move into a few other things we want to cover on stories. Or actually, I'm going to do that reverse. We're going to talk about college football playoff negotiations right now. Bill, you're welcome to stick around. I love having you here. Your opinions are really important, but this is going to be not so much on the money side. We're going to be talking realignment.
Yeah,
but
I've got a few more minutes. I'll listen in and then I'll check
all right.
it out.
That's up to you. Just let me know. All right, so let's get to some articles that have come out in the last day. And I'm going to say the last 24 hours have been kind of extraordinary. We've had dueling stories and narratives. Sorry, let me bring us back so everybody can see us really quick. So the dueling stories and narratives have been coming from different places. And there's some that are the 14-team playoff. There's some that are the 12-team playoff. There's some 16-team. And then there's some that say no big expanded playoff at all. It might be just 6. And you have conference championship ladders that they go through every year. I just want to say this really quick. So when you come to my shows, our shows on this channel, we're not going to tell you what to think. Okay. I have an opinion. Jen has an opinion. Macula has an opinion. Bill has an opinion. And we're going to give you those. It's an opinion show, but we try to back them up with some facts, right? So we use stories for those facts. I want to make something very clear. The leagues that have come out in the last 24 hours have been extraordinary in their diversity. We're talking polar opposite ideas. And I'm not going to tell you what to believe one way or the other, but I am going to tell you what the stories are, and then we'll discuss them. So I sort of setting the groundwork there. This is going to have to be something that we all work through together. There's 100 people watching. We're probably going to go up to about a 150 by the time we're done. And that's the conversation that we want to be in. So not really into conflict right now. We're into just conversation and talking about these different things. So the first one I'm going to cover, and that's the one I want to bring back to the stage, is this Dennis Dodd article dropped, what was it, this morning. And if you read it, and let me post a link to it. Immaculate, really quick, tell everybody what was the gist of this one article. Sorry, I lost it there.
Oh, I'm going to have to admit something. I don't really follow Dodd. I think he was kind of
That's okay.
He was a little behind. He was still talking about the, I think the 14 with the four automatic qualifiers for 2 conferences, 2 automatic qualifiers for Big 12 ACC, and then it's the old 14 idea with the 4 automatic qualifiers for the Big 2.
And I posted that link so everybody can go to it and follow through if they want to. Go ahead, Immaculate. I'm sorry.
That's, I mean, you have to go through it. I really, honestly, he tends to be a little behind. as it was today. He was talking about yesterday's story today while they were talking about the next story today. They got to really be keeping up, these guys. It's a different story every day, it seems, right now.
And the thing I would take away is that the 14-team playoff is being proposed by by I'll call them reporters, people that are influencers, because they're really promoting the SEC and the Big Ten to really rule college football. They're talking about having 4 per conference. The ACC and the Big Ten and the SEC both get 4 teams into a 14-team playoff. So let's do that math. How does that work? 4 teams each for 2 conferences. They have 8 teams gratis at the very beginning of every playoff round for every season. That means everybody else is fighting for them. And that means the Big 12 maybe gets 2. The ACC maybe gets 2. Now you're up to 12. Where does the G5 get access? So maybe they get 1.
G5 gets 1, and then there'd be 1 at large, which is basically set aside for Notre Dame.
And what do you guys think about that? Does that sound reasonable? Is that something that you could see the messaging making sense, and that's the narrative that you think might be pulled forward?
I think it's for the media, for the networks, it's got to be a plus for them to know that they're going to have 4 big brands from each conference guaranteed in those slots. And if I'm ESPN, I'm also thinking if you lose the first round, you're going to get invited to one of the bowl games. So I think they're going to double dip both in the playoffs and then those second tier bowl games. So I see it as just a continuing concentration of money and power within those two groups. Because those 2 commissioners, they're getting paid on how much revenue they can bring into the conference. I'm sure Sankey's got ideas that he's going to be in the $10-20 million range salary here in the next 5-10 years, because he's going to build an empire. So it makes sense to me.
He's talked about for years, right? The SEC is the preeminent conference.
I do think the Big Ten can give them a run for their money. I think. I think they could end up being the on top, in a few years. But it just, from a money standpoint, it seems to make sense. Not a fan perspective, but from a revenue standpoint, it makes sense.
What do you think, Jen?
I think the Big Ten is about to become the best conference in college football. I do. I think, I have a hard time with this one because I think the Big Ten is going to be the best one. I think the SEC, of course, will continue to, but I think the SEC is the most powerful one, if that makes sense.
Okay. So you think the most competitive is the Big Ten? You think the SEC is still the power center?
Yes, because they're, ESPN is their, I guess ESPN is their lapdog. That's the way I would put it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Immaculate. What do you think about that particular one? There's others that we'll go through.
I'm kind of leaning with what Bill was saying. This is more talk towards the networks. This is kind of seeing what they think. This is maybe they have one deal that's been offered to them. I think that they're throwing these out there. They're trying to basically throw out a net to get more deal offers from networks right now. And they're just throwing out these ideas because they can talk about these on their own. They're leaking this on purpose. So they're trying to get feedback from somewhere, somehow. So that's what I think it is. I think he's right. This is business talk. Whenever you see people talking about this, no one seems happy about these. What they seem is tribal. Like, you got the people who are like, okay, that's good for our conference. That's good. Or, well, that's not good for us. That's not good. So I think if you're there and you're really thinking about the business side of this, I think you have to look at this and say, none of this is really making people happy. So, figure out the numbers, figure out what works for networks, but this is probably going to have to be presented differently if they really want to make folks excited for this.
And let's bring that. Go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say, I think the Pac-12 press conference tomorrow, I imagine is going to be a plea for some sanity and more inclusiveness in college sports in general. So I can't imagine there's anything else they can really offer to the sports community other than, hey, this thing is going in the wrong direction. We gotta have more people at the table.
Hey, Bill, will you explain that a little bit more? I know what you're talking about, but I'm not sure everybody else does. Tell them about the meeting and what you think is going to come
So
out
the
of that.
Pac-10, so the Pac-12 as a new commissioner, George K is gone, and they've hired I think with their general counsel, I think from the Pac-12 is now the new commissioner, and so they've scheduled their first press conference for tomorrow to give an update on Pac-12 thinking in terms of their future. There's not a lot of options that they have to really communicate this time. They do have an agreement with the Mountain West Conference for football, the WCC for basketball, and Olympic sports for the next couple of years. But there's nothing in the immediate future that they really have anything to do. They're really in a waiting. They're kind of in purgatory, waiting to see if anything shakes out where they have a home in the next couple of years. So other than coming to the podium and saying, as he kind of has said in interviews, hey, I've been in these meetings and this is what I'm hearing and I don't like it. And as fans, you should probably not like it either. And there needs to be some pressure on university presidents across the board to keep a broader access to college football. That's the only thing I can think of that he
Immaculate, do you have any idea what could come out of that
For those
thing
two,
tomorrow? Well, it's a press conference. They called a press conference.
number one, first and foremost, I think it's just this is to get her feet wet. She was the deputy commissioner. She's now going to be the full commissioner. It's not interim, not acting. She's taken over. So I think this is her chance to present herself and be presented and kind of what her vision is, what she's going to do for the conference, where maybe they go. But I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of exacts and a whole lot of details. I don't think they have them to really share. So it's, to me, it's largely an introductory press conference.
Okay. Jen left, so I'm going to assume she didn't have an opinion on that one. That's okay. Let me go on to the next topic, which is Josh Pate. Let me bring that up so everybody can see it. So this tweet was 2 days ago, or am I lost now? 3 days ago. Josh Pate came out and he did a show and he said, I'm hearing things about the negotiations, and this is where he summarized it, I think, the next day. Basically, it says the two things I believe are baked into the ongoing college football playoff talks. First one is Big Ten and SEC are preparing to expand again. Second thing is one or both will restructure into 4 divisions and look to construct internal conference title mechanisms that are part of the CFP, meaning conference semifinals and conference title games, or will produce a conference champ to compete in a, what I'm assuming would be reduced, or no, it says right there, reduced size college football playoff. So I know the person that knows the most about this one is Immaculate. So Immaculate, kind of tell us what's going on here and why you think that's really maybe the way it might go.
Yeah, he put out a video too, and I think Josh is a little bit better actually at explaining things than he is writing up. But this is very much to the point. But some of the points he made when he was talking about it to me actually helped kind of clarify and give context. What he's saying and what I actually tend to agree with is that what we're seeing out in public right now via sports reporters is kind of code, is their way of talking about the things they want to see in this. But that once they work through that with the networks, that what will actually happen is something like this where, I mean, they can't really agree in the CFP boardroom. I mean, Bill's seen that. He's talking about that with them. And
Immaculate, can I interrupt you really quick? We got to let Bill go. He's got dinner. So, Bill, thank
I
you
was
so
just
much
calling.
for
It's a
coming
good
on.
call.
No. You keep going. I want you to keep going. But Bill, thank you very much for being here tonight.
Yeah. Thanks for having
Appreciate
me.
it, Bill.
We'll
Good to see
back,
you again. Okay? Thank you.
All right. See you later. Bye-bye. Sorry about that, Immaculate.
No, you're good. No, absolutely.
He was asking to leave. So, all right, keep going.
So basically, if they're having problems coming up to agreements in the boardroom for one united kind of full tournament for everyone to be part of, to me, the obvious answer then is it has to be decentralized. And that's kind of what this is. You're taking the CFP and you're decentralizing much of it into their own conference entities. And then you come together after that for something smaller. I've put together, just one example. There could be many, But that's the idea, is that if we're not working very well together anymore in the boardroom to figure out one single solution, then we need to each have our own partial solution and then come together for a final CFP that's smaller in size. So I actually agree with him. Now, that doesn't mean that's going to happen, but it's interesting to see, because that's a very different from what we're hearing from all the other sports reporters.
Jen, what do you think about that? You've heard, there's the 16 team and 14 team models, which are fairly standard tournament trees, right? This is completely different. This is a complete reorganization. And in a lot of ways, it devalues anybody else that's not in those two conferences.
I hate the way that that's going to go. I really do. But so I think that the Big 12 right now has an opportunity here with this. I think if they, and I don't see your Mark, sitting back and sitting on his hands. And I think you guys know, as I know, that they are on the phone with certain schools that are not being looked at by the SEC and the Big 10, right?
Right.
This is all being worked out. And I could see if the Big 12 could absorb, we talked about Clemson. What if Clemson doesn't have a spot in the SEC or the Big 10, right?
Yep.
The Big 12 absorbs, say a Clemson, say a Miami, right? Both. Are you going to tell me that that's not going to be something that ESPN and other, I think you could have a top 3 conference if you did it the right way, right? I think, and if it works out that way. I mean, if the Big 10 looks at, Clemson and Miami or SEC and they don't invite them, I think that's where you could look at it. I also have this, what about North Carolina? What if North Carolina decides to stay in the ACC and everybody merges?
Right.
ESPN is going to promote the hell out of North Carolina. We all know this. Okay, we all know it. That would be huge for them if say North Carolina doesn't go to the Big 10 or the SEC because they want to stick in the ACC, and the Big 12 and the ACC have some sort of merger, not a merger with every team in the ACC,
right?
But I'm saying the bigger teams. I think that could be a game changer. That could just be me, though.
No, that's why we're talking about it. These are ideas that are floating around out there. What's interesting is there's many of them, right? There's not just one, and we're trying to give everybody an idea, and I think that's definitely one that has merit. Really quick, Sergeant Pickles has a comment here. He says trading CFP games for expanded conference championships gives some teams a de facto double elimination advantage. What are your thoughts on that, Immaculate?
Well,
you see what he's saying there, right? Because
if we're saying, go ahead. What were you saying?
No, I'm just saying they're basically doing filtering twice. If they have these conference championship games and then they lead up to a more consolidated championship.
I agree. If the more consolidated CFP is anything more than just the champions,
right?
If you're bringing in more than the champions, then it seems kind of like you're just doing the same thing over again, and it's all about money, and people, it's not going to have the same feel.
That will turn people off, I think.
I think so. I agree. I mean, does it make more? Do you get more even though the turn off? I don't know. I mean, I hope it doesn't get to that point where they're seriously looking at it that way. But to me, that only really works if your tournaments get you down to champions and then champions take part. And then there's no fighting over how many AQs everybody gets.
Right.
Your value will be more determined by your own conference tournament than it will be by the CFP.
Absolutely. Rock and Rant is popped in here with a super chat saying, sure. So he's not too excited about these. By the way, Rock and Rant, I'm not believing that either. I believe in a wholly different than the first two I've talked about here. I believe in a third.
It's going to be interesting seeing how this changes every day. We're going to get a new presentation. And just remember, they're like, hey, ABC, what do you think about this one? Okay, NBC, you like this one? That's who they're really talking to.
After the show tonight, the three of us should get together and start a rumor and then leak it to somebody in a local press and then have them put it on Twitter.
Jen will have to call,
there's another
they're not
idea.
Listen to us. They might
no, it would have to be Jen. It would have to
be Jen. They're not going to listen to us.
I love that. I love to play the game of telephone. I'll be the villain. I don't mind it. I'm used to it.
So, I just for my sake, I don't believe in either of these first two. Let's just say that. I think it's
Okay.
going to be something different. So my one is the one that came out today, and I believe it because the numbers match what my belief system is. Let me bring that one up. Let's see here. So this is the third one that came out today. Greg Flugar on Peek Around the Corner has covered it extensively today, so I definitely give him credit for sort of sussing it out. Ross Dellinger wrote the article. And it says CFP circulating new 14-team model to include three. Oh, that's the wrong article. Sorry, did I grab the wrong one? It's this one.
That's
right?
that's Dodds. That was the one before the 4 and 4.
Is it the Vanini article? I might have bookmarked the wrong article.
If you're looking for an article, it's either Thamels.
The one that Greg referenced today.
He was either doing Thamels or he was doing Dellinger's.
Dellinger's? All right. Well, the one Greg was talking about today is basically the same format, but it includes 2 more teams. That would be
This is it right here. See
it would
the
be
however.
16 teams. Oh, that's right. However, here it is. However, this 3-3-2-2-1 format is being socialized among athletic administrators. That should be in the headline. I apologize, everyone. I confused myself.
It wasn't
however,
the tweet,
this,
so
yeah.
that was the tweet.
However, this is 3-3-2-2-1 format is being socialized among athletic administrators. Usually only one of the initial steps in the process of adopting a model. The format would start in 2026, which is all we've been talking about. And let's just break down what the 3-3-2-1 is. 2-2-1. I'm going to take this article. I'm going to hyperlink it. I'm not going to read it. Greg's already read it for you. If you want to have somebody read it to you like a book on tape, I recommend you go listen to Greg's show. I don't do that here. But basically what this means is that it's 16 teams. The Big Ten and the SEC both get 3 reserve slots. The ACC and Big 12 get 2 apiece. But there is a rumor out there that if the ACC loses some of its spit and vinegar with Florida State and who else knows, it might go to a 3-3-3-1, and the ACC could lose one of those. As a Big 12 person, I hope that happens. I hope the Big 12 grows like Jen has just described. So that's what it would end up. You'd have 3 primary big conferences, Big 12, SEC, and the Big 10. The ACC would get 1, and then the G5 get 1. And that leaves, 6, 10, 11. That leaves 5 at-large slots. And that's the one I think that knocks enough of the boards. In a top 15, in a top 20 idea, you're going to get a majority of the best teams in there. In fact, you'll get all of them, in my opinion, unless say a Boise State comes in at a 21, which I don't think would happen. So what do you guys think about that one?
I mean, I guess it's better. To me, it still has some of the same problems. Like it's 16. There's I don't think there's any buys involved with it, so it is going to diminish conference championship games considerably.
Right.
So whatever you might be gaining in payout from the CFP, you're losing from your losses to the conference championship game. So that has to be factored into it. Is it worth for the Big Ten? If people know, I think that was. There's 20 million, but I think that it might be more now. So it's a considerable amount of money that they're losing if they lose that game. But it's
that conference championship game is the one you're talking about, right?
It's more balanced. I mean, I for a Big 12 fan liking that better, I totally get it. I would too. In fact, it's getting a little closer to sanity. But for me, the whole idea of even doing the AQs beyond like champions or whatever is kind of an insane idea.
Right.
Like for me as a Big Ten fan, I get why they want to do that. It's the people who have to do the budget balancing in the athletic departments. They want to know what their bottom end is going to be. How much am I going to be having it up for our budget at the very lowest year when we make the least amount? So you want to have these automatic qualifiers to guarantee you what you're going to get. So you don't know like, oh, we might have a really bad year in football and only get 2 or 1 teams. They don't want that. But, most of the time, that's not going to be the case. And mathematically, it would be extremely rare, but they don't care. They want to know what's the worst case scenario in order to budget on it. So it's getting better. I still just think it's kind of code talk for trying to figure out how to get the most money from the networks. So we'll see how it goes, but it's better.
I want to give, before Jen, I'm sorry, I just want to give a shout out to Coos on Coos Corner. I'm glad you made it here. Justin, if you want to join the show, I just DM'd you the link. You're welcome to join. We've got a half hour to suss this stuff out in detail if you want to join. I want to hear what you're thinking. But anyways, I appreciate you being here, and we love to see you at a live show. Thank you very much. All right, Jen. So we've talked about now this is the third model of the three models, which is the one you like. And what do you think about this last one?
So I worry because you have a group of people that are going to decide who makes it to the playoff. And I think biases always come in when you have a group of people. I'm sorry. Again, it doesn't really matter what the college, whatever the playoff model is, honestly. I think they're going to take away, I think they're going to give certain conferences certain things because of said biases. So,
right.
Again, if you don't have a commissioner, if you don't have somebody in control of it, and you don't make these rules and you don't just let them stand, this is how it's going to go. And I think I'm just saying there's always going to be room for corruption. But without that point, I think the ACC is going to lose. I think the ACC I don't see them getting more than 2 spots in the playoff. I honestly only see them getting 1. I think the Big 12 will get 3 or 4. 3.
3. Yep.
Yep.
Sorry,
if Florida State leaves, that's how I see it going.
Right,
yes.
right. You're saying it shrinks, and then
So absolutely
having the 16 teams. The reason I like that is because I like watching as many good teams play as possible, right? But there are things that you trade, and a lot of that is you're playing more games. Everybody needs to be open and honest about that.
Mm-hmm.
You do lose money for the conferences with some of these conference championship type ladders, unless you want teams playing 18 games. They're not going to do that. So you're going to lose some money. And in this last one, as Greg described it, they're trading. They went from that 4 model, which is what we started with, the 14 team one we first discussed. They're trading 2 of those slots, actually, one for the Big 12. Sorry, trading 2 for each conference in the SEC and the Big 10. No, 1 for each conference, SEC and the Big 10, for money. They would do that, and the SEC and Big 10 will just continue to rake in more money per school. So everything has a cost, and I think it's just a matter of which is more important to these conferences. And this is a question I asked you guys. Is it money or is it access? And I'm talking direct access to the playoff.
Depends upon the conference. I mean, I would say money, but for some of them, they might care more about access than one thinks, like for the G5s. If they don't have access, it really does kind of put a spoiler on their entire program, on the entire point of it. They don't have to actually make it as long as they know they could. That's something that Notre Dame has talked about for a long time, that they're actually more concerned about access than they are about money, about being able to be there than they are about how much they make. And when you look at what Notre Dame actually makes from the CFP, I actually think they get paid less than many of the teams do in these other conferences. They don't make a lot off the CFP, but they've gained by their position on that board is access. Right. So I think that's the number one example of what you're asking here. Is like for a Notre Dame, they care more about the access than the money.
Very fair. Jen, what do you think about that?
I agree. And I think with Notre Dame, I think they get so much access. I think that is exactly what makes it worthwhile for them. And I also think I know everybody says Notre Dame's going to stay independent. I think Notre Dame's going to screw over the ACC and be like, "Here, y'all take Stanford. We're going to the Big 10."
Because they brought Stanford in and broke the league, and so now they get to leave them as a parting gift. You're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I want to welcome Coos from Coos Corner. Good to have you here, Justin. Let me get a couple of super chats out of the way, and then I'm going to turn it over to you for a few minutes. First of all, Carrie, who's one of our members for $9.99, says, shout out to Jen doing a great job repping Florida State. I'm going to add Georgia Tech to that, so that's a drinking game. If you're drinking and you follow us, I say Georgia Tech and tip one over for Jen. And then another one from Tony Lawson for $2 says, rumor, Wisconsin will drop football because they stink. And we all know where Tony Lawson went to school. Okay, thank you, Tony. Appreciate it. All right, Kuz. So I know you're following this realignment stuff like we are.
Yes.
I know you're seeing all these different ideas. And at this point, it's becoming shotgun mode every day for new ideas. What do you think about all of it?
Well, I mean, if you look at the and I didn't get to see all the models you guys talked about, but as far as the one that Ross Dellinger wrote about and others, I actually kind of like it.
The
I
last
don't
one,
know.
the one from today?
The 14 model with 3 3 2 2 1 3.
Yeah, I think that's actually a 16 eventually. By the bottom, it morphs to a 16, doesn't it? Oh, maybe I'm wrong.
It was three SEC, 3 Big 10.
You're
2
right.
Big
It
12,
is. It
2
is
ACC.
14. You're
Yeah.
right.
I like that model because it guarantees the Big 12 2 spots. And let's be honest, without it, I don't know that we get 2 spots most years.
Yeah, I agree.
If you leave it up to auto bids, or at large bids, the SEC and Big 10 are going to get most of the spots.
Sure.
Now, so I actually, from the Big 12 perspective, I actually like it. And I did the math on the money. You're still going to get a lot more money. Even if the SEC and Big 10 get the payout they're wanting, which is like 50% or whatever it is.
Right.
Total. We're still getting a huge pay bump in the Big 12. We're going to like double ours. We're still going to double our annual payout per team. So I'm okay with it. I mean, I know it sucks. Look, this separation of the Power 2 is going to happen whether we want it to or not. So if it's going to happen, if we can benefit from it some way, then let's do it, you know? At least we're keeping a seat at the table. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And the reason I confused myself about the 14 and 16 is because I still think we end up at 16. I don't think 14 is enough games. The more
I don't think anything's going to be enough.
Yeah, the
I think
more
it'll
teams
change
you
all the
add,
time.
it'll add more money.
Yeah.
Whoever's playing, those will be. But it's just instead of going to the Big 10 and the SEC, they would be at large. So that's the difference.
Yeah,
anyway.
I don't think they'll go to it at first. I think they might wait till the first contract's up in 2031 and then extend it because they don't want to dilute the payout any more than they have to.
Okay, it's possible. Yeah,
I
I think it definitely has legs. There's a lot of people talking about it today.
And it could. I'm just, it's theoretically, that's just how I'm trying to put my mind in the mind of a college president or an AD or a commissioner. Because, that $1.3 billion that number's not going up as they add teams. So I think they want to stay at 14 if at all possible.
Why?
Does adding 2 more teams make up for the loss of the pay that they get for those conference championship games? Because that's what could happen from the 14 to 16. With 14, if you still have buys, you could still.
Everything I've read, the $1.3 billion is the set number and it's not changing.
Right, but then you're really hurting then because now you're starting to cost conferences their conference tournament or their conference championship games. If they move to that 16, because the gain that you get from winning a conference championship game is less in value than the loss you get for the team that lost that conference championship game. So they're not going to want to hold those. And so you're weighing, the money for it versus the damage we're doing to one of those teams for the ranking. And remember now with home games in those first rounds, you could be having a team get knocked out of home game status. So it's a lot more complicated. And so I do think the 14 might win out, but I get why people would want 16 because it's more teams, more games, more fun. But
it's just 2 more spots for the SEC and Big 10.
Maybe.
Let's face
That's it. That's all it is. That is what. Okay, yeah, that is 100% what it is. And look, they're going to expand it depending on what team out of the SEC or the Big 10 gets left out. This is where it's going to happen. I'm just telling you, if Alabama or Georgia gets left out of a 14-team playoff because they lost 3 or 4 games, 1, I think they'll still be pushed in. 2, that's where you'll see things change. I mean, look at this. Alabama loses their coach, and all of a sudden we're changing signing days? Really?
Well, cool. And the idea of adding games would have to come with expanding that $1.3 billion. And if they're not going to do that, if they flat out say there's no expansion, doesn't matter how many teams are playing, then that by itself would eliminate that option. So whatever option is out there, they're trying to get the most money. We know that. If it's 14 teams, it's 14 teams. I just think 16 teams is, without so many complications, is just a cleaner playoff. But you guys could be totally right.
I mean, I'm okay with 16. I just don't want the I just want the Big 12 to be able to maximize the opportunity. And if 16 does that, then I'm all for it. But I just don't think 16 helps the Big 12. Now, if we get down the road and they end up adding money to the deal, then maybe we go that route. But and that's not. Have you guys talked about Notre Dame yet? Because I did tune in late.
We've touched on it. We don't like to get spun down on them, but go ahead and bring it up.
I just think I keep hearing all these people talk about how they think Notre Dame's getting squeezed out, and I don't think this hurts Notre Dame at all.
No, they have that large spot will basically.
They're still going to make a crap ton more money, and they now there's 3 at-large spots for them. There's 4 at-large spots now. So it's only 1 less at-large spot. And as long as they're ranked in the top 14, they're going to get in. So to me, I don't see how it's hurting Notre Dame. Am I missing something?
No, because they're not going to be forced to change until they're forced to change.
The only way that happens is if they lose their exclusionary, very unique spot in the whole dynamic of college sports. That's the only way they change.
I think this is the one that Notre Dame likes. The one that Notre Dame would not like is the one that I would like to ask you about at some point in time, and that's the idea that was floated by, I don't know if you saw Josh Pate with the conference tournament idea. That absolutely pushes Notre Dame out.
Yes.
But my curiosity to you seem to have looked in this real deeply. Do you like the 14 or 16 idea better, or do you like the idea of the Big 12 having their own tournament, which then you send your champion on to a tournament of champions? Which one would you prefer? Not money withstanding, just kind of like competition wise. What do you think would you be more interested in?
Does that mean
there's give and take to both?
Does that mean they only get one team in the playoff? If they
everyone only gets one team. Your champion.
If you only get one team in, I like the conference championship idea.
Because you would have like 6 teams from the Big 12 all playing each other in a tournament. And then the Big 12 just has to sell that tournament to a network or networks or whatever, and everyone kind of works their own deal, and then you come together with that. That was the idea. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's just kind of a new thing to throw around with people. Like, what do you actually like? Like, money wise, we don't know, but just kind of what does a Big 12 fan really like?
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of having the opportunity to get more teams. Listen, I come at this. West Virginia is the 15th winningest program of all time, and we have won more games than any team ever without a national championship. Mm-hmm. Whatever gets my team in the freaking playoff, I want it.
Y'all have more wins than Stanford without a national championship? That's wild. I mean, Stanford fans are so wild on the internet right now.
In football, we do, yes, but obviously they have more in other sports. But
well, we are aware they love to pound their chest about non-revenue sports. We get it. We get it, guys.
Well, that's because they're smarter than That's because they're smarter than everybody else, Jen.
Basket weaving is an important medal to have. I get it. I get it.
I can't say much. We like to brag about our rifle national titles too. So
all right, you guys in Utah and your skiing national championships, just go at it out there somewhere. All right, Larry, we're going to go through some comments that these people have been very patient, waiting almost 2 hours to get to. Larry, the GM, was the first one I marked when I signed on today. Says, what if ESPN says to the ACC, we will extend your TV deal if you let Florida State, Clemson, UNC, and UVA only go to the SEC where we have the media rights. In other words, they're trading one conference to another.
Interesting.
I've kind of thought about this for a minute. This is a very good question. I don't think ESPN is going to do that. I don't see ESPN because the ACC's money depends on a few schools, right? We have Florida State, Clemson, UNC, and that's about it, right?
Yes.
A little bit of Duke, maybe, but like everybody else, no. I mean, Virginia, I know they're a big TV market. I get it, but they bring nothing. They bring nobody can explain this to me otherwise. I'm sorry. I don't see it. But I will say I just don't see ESPN because of their relationship with the ACC. The ACC would lose money, and the ACC doesn't want to lose money. And I get it. You're fighting for your life.
They're going to steal from one arm to go to the other arm.
Exactly, and the ACC is not going to fall for that because those are their big money makers. If the ACC loses Florida State, Clemson, and UNC, this is over.
Right.
This is over. There's no way to keep it up. There's no way to repair it. There's no way to fix it. The ACC could lose. Maybe a Florida State. Maybe I don't think that Florida State and UNC leaving the ACC would kill it quickly.
Coos, what do you think?
It's an interesting idea. I'm like Jen, though. I don't think if they lose all 4 of those teams, I don't see how they survive. I think they could survive losing 2 of them.
Right.
I would equate that to the Big 12 losing Texas and Oklahoma. They would have to backfill. The problem with they wouldn't even have to backfill if they only lose 2 because they already have 18 teams, right? They kind of already done that.
Not really, because you got to think ESPN's got to renew that. ESPN's got to renew that thing in 2027, and ESPN is not going to give them the same amount of money, right?
I think it all depends on how badly they want the ACC network. If they need the ACC network to survive, and they need content on it, they're going to try to give them a deal. It may not be worth the same amount of money, but they're going to try to give them something.
And I agree with that. And I think, but if you think about it, other schools will say, hey, is the Big 12 going to offer? And then they leave. And then I think that's when the cascade goes.
Yeah.
All right, Immaculate.
One small problem with this whole thing, and this is an argument that's been made by Moen on the show multiple times, that what this would be is a market allocation scheme. By them offering the ACC a special deal for them to then offer these schools a special deal if and only if they go to the SEC, that would be a market allocation scheme, and not allowing them to have the same deal of exit for wherever they decide to go. So this could have some legal ramifications. So I don't think that this would happen, but if ESPN can find a way to do it without having the finger pointed at them, they'd probably try to do it.
100. But I think it also falls into that antitrust, which becomes federal. I think you can't. That's a hard thing to pull off, and I don't know that right now. ESPN's really messy right now. They're really messy. They're too loud. There's too many leaks. I don't think they could pull it off without it being an antitrust thing if they tried to do that way. That's what I would say.
If you know anything about college sports right now, it's under siege in the law. Their legislation and courts. The NCAA by itself is just inundated, and then we get into regulation, and that's a whole different conversation. But Devil Frog says ESPN and Fox save money by consolidating inventory. We've been saying that here forever. It's obviously true.
That's part of the Big 12's whole thing. People wonder what's the point of the Big 12. Well, both ESPN and Fox are looking at them as having a valuable position. That's why they're both having to deal with them. And for whatever money technically ESPN might lose and maybe moving a school to the SEC and paying them more, they might actually gain it by having them over on the Big 12, because the Big 12 doesn't have escalators in their contract, whereas the ACC does. And if the ACC is losing programs already, it's going to happen, then their value is much lower. So I think that they could possibly balance it out. And I think that's kind of what the point of the Big 12. It's going to be to catch programs that still have considerable value and to create this kind of very, a conference that has parity and that is going to be highly competitive. So, I think they could do it. They just need to watch the legal issues involved with doing it.
Coos, what do you think?
I mean, they kind of already are. When you look at this streaming deal that they made,
it's being challenged, but you're right.
Yeah, it is being challenged, and that's the first thought I came into my mind when I read about it. Is how is this not collusion? I mean,
right.
Well, it's
old money. Old money looked around and saw everyone else coming after them and said,
or whatever illegal activity you want to call it. It's probably multiple things, actually.
Right.
But I mean, monopoly. They're monopolizing the market. I mean, how is it not monopolizing the market when you do that? And it's dropping the value of all the media rights deals, basically, for in the future, for all these conferences and all these teams by them going together. So I think that's exactly what they're doing. And if they can do it without getting staying in court. That's going to be the hard part.
Right. Jen, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think I kind of agree with everybody on this point. With ESPN and I mean, it's hilarious. It's really funny, but yeah, I agree.
Quick question
Very
for
good.
you guys.
Yeah.
This kind of goes in line with what Greg Swain posted the other day. That he said I think it was Greg said he's hearing that the SEC and Big Ten are essentially going to gobble up and have moved it to like a 2-league 64-team model. Did you guys see that?
I saw it. I don't believe it.
I don't either, but
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what I wanted. That's what I was wanting to ask is, do you guys believe that?
That story seems to get a lot of people to pay attention to it based upon
It does.
fear,
It's
based
clickbait
upon
for sure.
desire. Yeah, I don't want to say that because I like Greg.
It has nothing to do with Greg. It's an article on Twitter that's.
I mean, it works for getting people's attention, but I don't really actually think that that's where anyone's actually trying to go. I just don't think it's a good business move.
I don't think it makes any sense either.
Greg has sources. Anybody who thinks Greg doesn't have source is crazy. He's been in the industry for almost 40 years.
Yeah.
He just puts stuff together and comes up with ideas. I just think that particular one had a lot of moving pieces to it.
You're being nice.
I like Greg. Greg and I are pals. So
I have nothing against Greg either. I just was curious as to what you got.
I sent him a message when I saw it, and I called him.
So did I.
Yeah,
I didn't call him out. I just asked him.
Kind of curious what Kuz's message would be.
No, I just asked him. I was just asking him a little bit.
No, it's
a
all
little bit more detail on it that he might not be able to share online, but he didn't really tell me anything extra.
Right.
So.
Carrie, one of our members, says FSU don't want anything to do with the SEC or ESPN. Is that right, Jen?
Look, I think there are things that the SEC could offer that would make FSU want to. I mean, I just think that the focus, I think everybody knows it. This is not reading tea leaves. This isn't being clairvoyant. I think everybody knows what's going on here. Florida State's going to the Big Ten as of right now. Could things change? Yes, absolutely. But I don't, okay, here's my thing. And this is not, I love Florida State. I'm a big representative, but right now, why would the SEC be courting Florida State? They're not available.
Big Ten.
There's no, I get it, but like, that's not technically happening right now, right? So I do think the SEC doesn't want the Big Ten to take Florida State, right? I do. I think we all can agree with that, right? But I don't think that Florida State is going to go to the SEC without a full share. And I don't see them choosing or going to the SEC because they don't want to be treated like the redheaded stepchild they were in the ACC. That is going from one situation to another where you're unhappy. I'm sorry. I don't see it.
Anybody else?
I think she said it all.
I think she's the source here. So I'm going to defer to her.
Exactly.
Timothy Green says Florida State will definitely go to the Big Ten, in my opinion. So there you go. There's your vote. I know you've been waiting for that one, Jen.
Oh, I have.
From Chad Bracey. I don't think the ACC falls apart. It drops a tier, which is we've discussed that a little bit. Unless ESPN drops contract altogether, we could do a quick poll of the four of us who actually thinks the Big 12, once Florida State leaves, doesn't at least pick up one school. I think it happens to be more, but
yeah. I mean,
who thinks they are not going to pick up one?
If just Florida State leaves?
If just Florida State leaves.
I don't think they pick up any.
Okay. That's fair.
I think they pick up two.
Two? Okay, Immaculate?
I don't think just Florida State leaves, but if just Florida State leaves, then yeah, they might hold the ACC together.
Well, I didn't say that just Florida State left. I said once Florida State leaves.
Once Florida State leaves, I think
it's a cascade effect, right? That's what I think is going to happen.
Kind of what we saw with the ACC, a little bit mixture of like a USC and Colorado effect. Like,
right.
You'll see a scramble to try and hold it together, keep it together, and then someone's going to break ranks, and then everyone's going to lose their minds and run around with their heads cut off like a chicken. Like
Right.
it's probably going to go somewhat like the ACC if Florida State gets out, or the Pac. Sorry.
Coos, you think so?
Yeah, that's what I think too. I mean, I think more than one team will leave, but I think it would take more than just Florida State leaving to make it collapse, because teams like Clemson, UNC could hold that thing together. But if they leave, then ESPN decides, you know what, I don't think we'll renew this deal in 2027.
Right.
It's not worth anything, or at least it's not worth. It may only be worth $20 million. And at that point, Virginia Tech's on the phone going, "Hey, Brett,
Right.
let's renew
Right.
the Black Diamond Trophy game with West Virginia. How about what you say?"
Well,
And-
so
And it's
riddle me
snowballed.
this then, you guys, and this is, I know I got a comment here from Replica. We'll get to that in a second, but I mean, what is the value? And Jen, you've answered this question before. What's the value of the ACC drop once Florida State leaves? I think it's over 10%.
Huge.
So
30%.
Yeah.
30%. I mean, it's a lot, right?
I had it
So-
at 28. I think it's at 20 for me. I think it's at 28, but
Wow.
you know,
I said 28 before, and you said 12. Wait a second, you just switched.
I said 12.
Yeah,
Did I?
yeah, it's okay. I'm teasing.
Oh, I don't remember that. Oh,
It's
hell.
okay. Yeah,
you know,
no,
you never know what I'm doing. You know, my mind goes 8,000 places.
I'm the same way. I'm just teasing you. Coos, what do you think? What's the value of Florida State to the ACC?
Man, I've never
Because if you
thought
think
that deep.
that answers
I've never
the
thought that
question.
deep. I think 20% is probably a closer number.
So if it's 20%, Florida State leaves. Who do they bring in to replace Florida State to keep that valuation for the rest of the conference?
Oh,
That's where I come to the ACC just folding.
Yep.
Because the valuation goes down so far because not because Florida State leaves, it's just a school. It's because they take so much TV market with them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The value of the entire contract goes down, and they're going to have to replace it, right? They're going to have to replace it with something. And I can't think who they could bring in that would make up the difference.
You're not going to equal it. You'd have to bring in multiple teams, like the Big 12 did. They brought in 4 teams to just even come close to replacing Texas and Oklahoma.
But
So do we think Washington State and Oregon State fill that gap? I don't.
No. Maybe those two, along with South Florida and Memphis and
all of those.
But
would
that
have to
still
put up
doesn't
with
work
like
because
they're all going to put up with a reduced payout like SMU.
Yep.
Even at
that's
that.
what I'm saying. Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's why I think the whole ACC thing is it's a house of cards.
I agree, and I also think you're talking about a mob mentality when Florida State leaves. You're going to have, depending on how they get out, whatever the resolution is, right? You're going to have some panickers. You're going to have panickers picking up that phone, going, "Oh wow, they got out. Let me do it. I'm out. I don't want to be left out of this realignment. I don't want to be stuck in this clown show, Jim Phillips." Right? We just don't. Nobody does. I honestly, I understand there are some ACC people like pounding their fists on the table, like going, "Oh, it's a great conference." It's really not. And they don't.
Tell us really how you feel, Jen. Really.
Look, they don't really do anything of anything worthwhile. Look, we had a conference chairman who did nothing when an undefeated team got left out of the playoffs. They didn't do a dang thing. Look, ACC doesn't care about anything as far as football, and that's what drives everything. And if y'all don't believe me, then Gonzaga would be in the Big Ten. I'm sorry. I just don't have anything else to say about that. And I think, I do think people are going to start panicking, and I think that's when you're going to see the cascade of leaving when Florida State gets out. That's why I think losing Florida State is such a detriment to the ACC, or else the ACC wouldn't be doing what they're doing right now.
Here's the question, though.
Go ahead.
Apparently, according to the filing, if the ACC's filing is accurate, that they just made the amended filing or whatever that came out yesterday, apparently 12 teams voted to sue them.
They did, yes.
So there are at least 12 teams, or 10, or however the math works out, 10 to 12 teams who wanted to sue them. At least. I really hope it leaks who did not vote for that, because then that'll tell us all we need to know.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be North Carolina. I think it's going to be Clemson. And I think I'm going to take a
vote for it.
No.
That's 3. That's 3.
Yep. And by the way, I have heard that a certain 2 teams that weren't supposed to get a vote were actually sitting in said meeting.
Yeah, they
but
were
they
in there,
can't
but they didn't
vote
vote.
yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can't
That's
vote.
what
True,
I read
but
the same
they
thing.
were, in there. Look,
Right.
although I would love it to be Miami to have voted for it, I really would, just so I could, make some money off
It's
Twitter with
possible
all
they
that.
did, though.
Hmm?
It's possible they did.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Immaculate, I know you have a thing about Notre Dame.
I have a thing about Notre Dame.
About Notre Dame could keep the ACC together.
Oh, they're the
With
one
Florida
team that
State.
could come
That's
in
it.
to replace Florida State
Yep.
because it's when
If
you look
they
at the
join.
ACC,
Right.
it's not. There's really only two teams that get shown on ABC, and you have to have a very particular matchup
No
in order
idea.
to even get on ESPN's main channel. Mostly the ACC gets on ESPN too. So the rest of it all, when people are saying, well, how much value is left? I was being nice by saying 30%. I would go even farther than that. If someone really wanted to be shocking, I would say 50%. I would say, or maybe 40%, 40% FSU, 35% Clemson, and then the rest is split up because they just don't get on the channels that pay. So yeah, you would need a Notre Dame to come in to counter that, and that's about it. But in terms of the vote today, that was going on, people kind of maybe want to take a look at that. I went into that on Twitter today. Look, the ACC is screwed now. I don't know how to put it less than that.
So we're 2 hours in on a show now,
they
Immaculate.
proved-
Realize that?
Well, I know, but they proved themselves to break their own bylaws by their own amended complaint and having everyone vote on it.
Right.
By them knowing that they had to do that, and by doing it with the amended complaint, they're saying they went around their own bylaws just so they could jump out ahead of Florida State to sue a member that gave them the power to do that, and that power is governed by your bylaws. So to me, someone could have voted on that, one of the 12, knowing that they were basically driving the nail into the heart of the ACC, because if they hadn't voted on that and they hadn't passed that, they could claim ignorance possibly of getting that out, going, oh, we didn't realize that. So I don't know. I think some of those that voted for it might actually be a little Benedict Arnold. We'll see.
We're gonna talk about that vote more on Friday. We don't have enough time to get into it.
We
That
probably
was
need a
one
little
thing
alcohol
to
for
get
that,
to.
just to be honest.
Yeah, we invite you guys to come back, Jen and Coos, but we simply don't have enough time to. The whole legal drama with the FSU ACC thing is just a nightmare. And now ESPN's said something. I cannot think of a bigger legal mess. We thought the Pac-12 was a nightmare.
Oh,
The
yeah,
ACC FSU thing
No.
is absolutely.
Do you mean being called felons for a civil case? Is that what you
right?
mean?
Yeah. That's why I didn't bring it up, as I knew that would start that
Michael
conversation.
Alford's going to prison.
Yeah,
I know
that's right. Let me get to this really quick. Replica has been a member with us for 2 months. We appreciate you being here, Replica. Thank you very much. His comment says the ESPN FSU relationship broke down 10 years ago. I would argue it's been longer than that, hasn't it, Jen?
Okay. I think it's been a little questionable for a long time, but I think it absolutely 100% broke down when ESPN reporters were going through Jameis Winston's trash. 100%. 100%. I think it broke down without any sort of fixing or 10 years ago during 2013. Absolutely. Because ESPN actually wanted FSU to be left out of that championship game too. Just saying.
Okay. Excellent. Anybody else want to comment on that one? I'll put it back up so you can see it.
I don't really know all the whole history between those two.
So, okay.
It's been ugly. I will say it's been ugly. The problem, I think, when Jameis Winston, and I will say this nationally because it's been proven, was falsely accused. ESPN had a 24-hour news service going through trash, dealing with all these things, saying he absolutely 100% did this because, someone said he did. And I think that rubbed them the wrong way. And then they started saying, should they be left out because of said accusation, right?
Right.
When a Texas quarterback was accused of the same thing that year and you didn't see them there. That was the problem. There you go.
All right, very fair. Coos, I'm going to let you say your piece first. Thanks for joining the show, by the way, tonight. This has been
Absolutely.
awesome.
Glad I can make it.
You want to tell everybody what you do and where to find you?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube at Coos's Corner. Cover West Virginia, the Big 12, and conference realignment. I also have a website, coosascorner.com, where I myself and some other writers cover strictly West Virginia. And I have a basketball channel called Hoops from the Hills, where we cover West Virginia and Big 12 basketball. So
Nice.
thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm a huge fan. I watch your stuff all the time. I'm just letting you know.
I'm honored. I appreciate
Always
that.
good to see you, Coos.
Everybody
Always
should go to those channels, follow them on Twitter, and subscribe on YouTube. There's no doubt about it. Okay, Jen, you're next.
Well, I am on the wonderful Renegade Report. You can follow me and George, who is at Renegade Report #1, I think.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
Okay, cool. I got that right. We are on Tuesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. And so look for us at that time. And we have a lot of fun. It's fun.
I appreciate you coming on and being a co-conspirator with me tonight. I hope you've had fun.
Absolutely.
I want to keep doing this. Wednesday nights are open, and if you want to do it, let's keep it going. Immaculate has joined us as a contributor tonight. How you doing, Immaculate?
It's been a day.
Can't talk. I'm sorry.
But it seems like these days are pretty normal now. As far as where to find me, you guys know I'm here with this guy right here. I do my own thing on Twitter X, at Immaculate View. We have some conversations every once in a while. I piss off a few people unintentionally. So, but if
it's
you
intentional.
Like,
don't lie.
maybe sometimes. But if you like the conversations that we have here on the show, I do suggest finding me on Twitter X and joining on in. I do like to see what people have to see on things. Always learning from folks. See you guys, all three of you on there all a lot. So it's a fun place. So come and join us.
I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight on College Football Mafia channel. We have a bunch of sub shows. Obviously, we have one Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and now we have one on Sunday and Monday. So we're covering almost the whole week. We appreciate everybody for being here tonight on a Wednesday night. We had 150 people watching at one time. That's a big number on a Wednesday night. So we're very appreciative of everybody and look for you to be here again on Friday night. We start an hour earlier at 9 Eastern. Other than that, everybody stay out of trouble. Have a great night. If you've been drinking with Georgia Tech, please don't drive, and we'll go from there. So peace out for everybody. Have a great night. We'll see you later.